What's up guys, Magic Navs here, and this is the M4 assault rifle. This is the AKM, popularly known as the AK47, but really it's the AKM. And these are the most famous assault rifles in the world. These are the Cold War rivals of each other as well. This was made in America by Eugene Stoner, and this was made by Russian designer, or the Soviet Union, Mikhail Kalashnikov. And these guns have been squaring off with each other for decades. And to this day, there's a lot of debate between these two guns, and which is better between the two. Now, first things first, these are just airsoft guns. They're not actually real steel guns. So, if you're wondering, this is a VFC VR16 CQB M4, and this is a CYMA CM048S AKMS. So I've grown such a respect for both of these platforms that I kind of wanted to do a quick comparison video for you guys and girls, just so you kind of get an idea of the history between these two and what's the differences and why people will have the debate about them. Because, you know, there's pros and cons for both of these. So I'm gonna give you a quick rundown of each of them. So the M4, or the original of this, was the M16. This M16 was really the first version of this M4 platform, so to speak. Now, it all started actually with the AR-15, which was, you know, to this day, we know what the AR-15 is. It is the most popular rifle in North America, and it was created by Eugene Stoner, and eventually that eventually became the M16, which was put into service in 1964 and was first time used in Vietnam. And so eventually they wanted to make a shorter version of the M16, so they shortened the barrel and made some other modifications, and eventually they came up with the M4, which is what we know of as of today. And even eventually they make the AK47, which is an improved version of the M4. But long story short, the whole idea of the M4 was to make it as light as possible. So they don't put a lot of metal parts to this. I mean, they still add some, but you know, they try to add as much polymer or plastic parts to this. That way it's easier to carry around. It's not gonna tire you out too fast. So that was the whole purpose of the M16 or the M4 design. So, and in addition to that, this shoots, the M16 and the M4 fire a 5.56 by 45mm bullets. So the idea of it was to make it easier to carry more rounds for the soldier, and it also was a very accurate bullet because it traveled faster. So by doing that, it provided more accuracy. It was a lot easier to control under fully automatic fire. It didn't have a lot of recoil to it, and you could reach very good distances with the 5.56 bullets. So that was the main pros that came with this M4 or M16 platform. And later on, or not too long after, you could add so much customization to this gun. You could add a lot of accessories such as the red dot sight, lasers, flashlights, you name it. So that's another thing that the M4 or the M16 provided, just because you had the ability to add so much customization to it. Now, when it first entered in the Vietnam War, there were some jamming issues just because they changed the gunpowder that they used, and they also didn't add a chrome barrel to it either. So that did cause some issues, but eventually, after they tweaked it over time, this became a reliable weapon that was usable enough for most scenarios. And you know, people telling you that the M4 AR-15 is prone to jamming. It's not as prone to jamming as you might think it is. It did for a while when it first came out, but nowadays, you know, the AR-15 or the M4 are very reliable enough weapons that you would expect from a modern assault rifle. Now, moving over to the AK, this was designed by the very original AK, which was the AK-47, designed by Mikhail Kalashnikov in the Soviet Union, now we know as Russia. This was a much more traditional design. So there's a lot of steel parts to this gun, which does make it very heavy. Now it does have the famous wood grips that you originally know it as the AK-47. But the fact of the matter is, the true Russian AK-47 is actually a very rare find now. And so they're pretty much antiques. And the one thing that most people do not realize is that most of the AK-47s that you see on TV or movies, they're not true AK-47s. They're actually either AKMs or Chinese-made Type 56s, which are basically Chinese copies of the AK-47 or the AKM. And the way to spot it is, if it is an AK-47, it would have a larger cutout on the side of the gun right here. But if you see just a small cutout like this is a giveaway that is most likely an AKM. The other giveaway is in the front sight. AK-47s and AKMs have a open front sight at the top, but Type 56s will have a completely closed ring for the front sight. So that is also a dead giveaway for the AK-47 versus the Chinese Type 56. Now, on the M4, you've got, of course, semi-auto and full auto. The first setting is semi-auto, and then the last setting is fully auto. Whereas on the AK-47 or the AKM or all AK platforms, you go down to fully auto first, and then to semi-auto. Now, some people might think that it's because the Russians purposely wanted to make this a fully automatic gun, but it's really because when you actually flip this down, when you're in the moment, you just flip it all the way down to semi-auto, and then you have to instinctively push it back up to fully automatic. So that's the reason why it's designed like this. Compared to the M4, the AKM or the AK-47 fires a 7.62 by 39mm bullets, and so it's a much bigger bullet than the M4. And even though it's not as accurate and it doesn't travel as fast, it doesn't have as much distance to it, it has quite a lot of stopping power compared to the M4. You can cause quite a lot of damage with the 7.62 compared to the M4. Even though the M4, the 5.56 bullet does provide sufficient damage and power, the 7.62, just because it is a bigger bullet, it does cause more damage. One thing to mention too is that the M4 or the M16 rifle now have adjustable stocks to them, whereas the AK-47 or AKM doesn't really have as much adjustment. In this case, you can fold the underfolding stock or the side folding stock in to make it more compact, but it's just not as adjustable. One thing too is that the AK-47 or the AKM isn't as customizable, or you can't add as many accessories to this gun. In the beginning, you could add a side mount to this where you could add a red dot, or even maybe you could get some barrel clamp to add a flashlight, but that's really much it. You couldn't really customize it much. It wasn't until later, once the AK-74 came out, they switched it to a 5.45 by 39mm, which is their Russians' version of the 5.56 made by the Americans. And so at that point, gradually they started adding a bit more customization. They started adding rails to the top and the bottom, as well as back here. You can even have rails on the top of the dust cover. And so they wanted to make it a little bit just as modern as the American M4. So really, it all comes kind of down to preference and what type of battle you are in. So honestly, I like both guns. Why should you argue between which is better? So with that said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope to see you guys in my future videos. Until next time, peace out.